The day luxury SUVs rolled into the dusty village outside Ibadan, everyone expected a wealthy stranger. Instead, they watched a graceful young woman step out and quietly pay the hospital bills of the very family who had once refused to spend a single naira to send her to school. Years ago, they had called their adopted daughter a burden, forcing her to scrub floors while their own children carried school bags. Now, as tears filled their eyes, only one question remained unanswered. Why would Adebimpe return to save the people who had stolen her childhood? Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. We'd love to hear from you. And if stories of hope, justice, and second chances touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next inspiring journey. 8 years before anyone in the village would speak Adebimpe's name with admiration, she arrived carrying nothing except a small cloth bag and a frightened heart. The Harmattan wind blew fine red dust across the narrow road leading into the farming community outside Ibadan. Every mud house looked the same to the little girl. Every unfamiliar face made her wonder whether she would ever belong anywhere again. Only a week earlier, she had buried both of her parents after a terrible road accident. She was too young to understand every detail, but she understood enough to know that no one was coming back for her. The villagers whispered as she stood beside the community elder. "Poor child. She has no relatives left. What will happen to her now?" Among those watching were Adewale Akinyemi and his wife Ronke. They were respected farmers who owned one of the largest cassava fields in the village. People believed they were generous because they often donated food during festivals and attended every church gathering. When the village elder asked whether anyone could take responsibility for the orphaned girl, Adewale slowly stepped forward. "We already have 2 children," he said calmly, "but no child should sleep without a family." The villagers nodded with approval. Ronka smiled gently and placed one hand on Adebimpe's shoulder. "From today," she said softly, "you will live with us." For the first time since losing her parents, Adebimpe felt something warm inside her chest. Hope. She believed she had found another family. That evening, she entered the Akinyemi household. Their son Tunde was 11 years old. He barely looked up from the football he was cleaning. Their daughter, Yetunde, who was 9, smiled politely before returning to her homework. Everything inside the house fascinated Adebimpe. The shelves, the dining table, the family photographs hanging neatly on the walls. She imagined her own picture joining them one day. At dinner, Ronke served steaming yam porridge. She gave generous portions to Adewale Tunde and Yetunde. When she finally reached Adebimpe, only a small spoonful remained. "It is enough for you," Ronke said. Adebimpe smiled anyway. "Thank you, Mama." Ronke did not answer. The first few days passed quietly. Adebimpe tried her best to be helpful. She swept the compound every morning. She fetched drinking water before sunrise. She folded everyone's clothes carefully. Whenever Ronke thanked her, Adebimpe felt proud. She believed kindness would eventually earn love. But as the weeks became months, something slowly changed. The requests became expectations. The expectations became duties. Before sunrise every day, Ronke shook her awake. "Adebimpe, wake up. The water pots are empty." While Yetunde still slept peacefully beneath her blanket, Adebimpe balanced heavy buckets on her head and walked nearly 2 kilometers to the village borehole. After returning, she swept the compound. She washed yesterday's dishes. She prepared firewood for breakfast. She cleaned the chicken coop. She fed the goats. Only after everyone else had finished eating was she allowed to sit quietly in the corner with whatever food remained. She never complained. She believed every family had different rules. Perhaps this was simply how adopted children proved they were grateful. Months turned into years. Tunde received a brand new school uniform. Yetunde proudly carried colorful exercise books tied with a blue ribbon. Every weekday morning, they laughed together as they walked toward the village primary school. Adebimpe watched from the gate while holding a basket filled with dirty clothes waiting to be washed. She admired their uniforms more than their smiles. She dreamed about holding books, about learning letters, about sitting inside a classroom. One afternoon, she gathered enough courage to speak. Mama, Ronke barely looked up from sorting vegetables. What? May I go to school too? Silence. Ronka slowly raised her eyes. Who will finish today's work? I can work before and after school. And who will fetch water? I will wake up earlier. And who will clean the house? I'll do everything. Ronke laughed without humor. You talk too much. Adebimpe lowered her head. I am sorry. That evening, she tried again, this time with Adewale. Baba! He continued repairing a farming tool. What is it? I want to learn how to read. Adewale sighed heavily. Education costs money. I can study very hard. We already pay school fees for Tunde and Yetunde. I don't need new clothes. We cannot waste money. Those words stayed inside her heart. Waste money, as though her future had no value. From that day onward, no one in the family discussed school with her again. Instead, her workload continued to increase. During planting season, she worked beside hired laborers under the scorching Nigerian sun. Her small hands developed painful blisters. During harvest, she carried sacks nearly half her own weight. When guests visited, Ronke proudly introduced Tunde as her future engineer. She described Yetunde as her future doctor. Then she would glance toward Adebimpe. She helps around the house. Nothing more. No dreams, no future, no identity. Yet the little girl never allowed bitterness to settle inside her heart. Every evening after finishing her chores, she would stand quietly near the dusty road leading to the school. Children returned home, laughing, carrying books against their chests. Sometimes they practiced multiplication aloud. Sometimes they read English sentences together. Adebimpe listened carefully from behind a mango tree. Without realizing it, she began memorizing words she had never seen written. One afternoon, a torn mathematics notebook lay abandoned beside the roadside. Its cover was dirty, and half the pages were missing. To everyone else, it was rubbish. To Adebimpe, it was treasure. She carefully picked it up. She brushed away the dust. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she lit a tiny kerosene lamp inside the storage room where she slept. Slowly, she traced the strange shapes on the paper with her finger. ABC. She whispered each letter again and again. The next evening, she found an old newspaper wrapping used to carry vegetables from the market. She flattened it carefully. Although she could barely understand the words, she copied every letter onto the back of discarded cement bags using a small piece of charcoal. Learning became her secret. Every forgotten scrap of paper became another lesson. Every broken pencil she found near the school became another gift. She hid everything beneath her sleeping mat because she knew Ronke would throw them away. One Monday morning, while carrying water back from the borehole, Adebimpe stopped at the top of a small hill overlooking the village school. The bell rang. Dozens of children rushed through the gate wearing clean green and white uniforms. Teachers welcomed them with warm smiles. For a long moment she stood perfectly still. She imagined herself among them, holding books, answering questions, writing her own name. The dream felt so close that tears slowly rolled down her cheeks before she even noticed them. She quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand. Then she lifted the heavy bucket onto her head once more. Without saying a single word, Adebimpe turned away from the school and began the long walk back home, carrying not only water, but the silent hope that one day, somehow, her life would be different. Adebimpe's secret education began with things that everyone else considered worthless. Every Tuesday and Friday, Ronka sent her to the village market to sell cassava tomatoes and palm oil. While most children rushed through the market looking for sweets or toys, Adebimpe searched for something entirely different. She looked for discarded paper, old newspapers, used exercise books with empty pages, broken pencils that still had enough graphite to write. Whenever shopkeepers swept rubbish into piles, she quietly asked if she could take the unwanted papers home. Most laughed. "What do you want trash for?" She simply smiled. "I can use it." No one asked another question. At night, after everyone had fallen asleep, the storage room became her classroom. The tiny kerosene lamp flickered against the cracked mud walls as she carefully copied letters again and again onto flattened cement sacks. ABC, then words. House, tree, water, family. Sometimes she made mistakes so many times that the charcoal rubbed holes through the paper. She never became discouraged. She simply started again. One evening, Yetunde accidentally walked into the storage room without knocking. She stared in surprise. "What are you doing?" Adebimpe quickly hid the papers behind her back. "Nothing." Yetunde stepped closer. "You were writing." Adebimpe lowered her eyes. "I just wanted to learn." For a brief moment, Yetunde seemed unsure what to say. Then footsteps approached outside. "Ronke." "What are you two doing?" Yetunde immediately answered. "Nothing, Mama." Ronke glanced around the room suspiciously before leaving. Only after the footsteps disappeared did Yetunde whisper quietly, "You should hide those better." Adebimpe looked up. "You won't tell?" Yetunde shook her head. "I don't want trouble." It was not kindness. It was not cruelty. It was simply indifference. But to Adebimpe, even silence felt like protection. Days became months. Months became years. At 10 years old, Adebimpe could recognize many English words simply by studying old newspapers. She still could not pronounce all of them correctly, but she refused to stop trying. Whenever she delivered vegetables near the village primary school, she slowed her steps. The classrooms had wide windows without glass. From outside she could hear every lesson. She never dared step inside the school compound. Instead, she stood beneath a large mango tree just beyond the fence while pretending to rearrange vegetables inside her basket. Inside one classroom, a teacher wrote multiplication tables across a blackboard. 3 times 4 equals 12. The children repeated together. Adebimpe whispered the answer under her breath. 12. The next question came. 5 times 7. Several students hesitated. Before anyone answered, Adebimpe quietly murmured 35. She smiled to herself. Another lesson followed, English reading. The teacher held up a storybook. The farmer planted maize before the rainy season. Adebimpe repeated every sentence softly. She imagined holding the same book in her own hands. When the bell rang, she hurried away before anyone noticed her. This became her routine. Whenever market errands allowed, she stood outside different classrooms. She memorized lessons through open windows. She learned mathematics by listening. She learned English by repeating every sentence she heard. She learned science by remembering every explanation. No teacher knew. No student noticed. Except one. His name was Chief Olumide Adeyemi. He had once served as principal of the school before retiring several years earlier. Although officially retired, he often visited the school to help younger teachers organize books and mentor struggling pupils. One Wednesday afternoon, he noticed a small girl standing beneath the mango tree. She held an empty basket. Her clothes were faded. Her sandals were worn almost completely through. Yet her eyes remained fixed on the classroom with extraordinary concentration. He watched quietly from a distance. When the mathematics lesson ended, the girl repeated every formula almost perfectly before walking away. Curious Chief Olumide followed her at a respectful distance. She did not stop to play. She did not meet friends. She walked directly toward the farming village, carrying the empty basket on her head. The next week, he saw her again and again, always standing outside, always listening, always leaving before anyone noticed. Finally, he decided to speak with her. One afternoon after classes ended, he approached gently. "My daughter." Adebimpe turned suddenly. Fear flashed across her face. "I am sorry, sir." "For what?" "I shouldn't stand here." "Who told you that?" She hesitated. "No one." "Then why are you apologizing?" She remained silent. Chief Olumide smiled kindly. "What is your name?" "Adebimpe." "Which class are you in?" She looked at the ground. "I don't attend school." The old man's smile slowly disappeared. "You don't?" She shook her head. "My family cannot send me." "But you come almost every week." "I like listening." "What do you hear?" "Everything." He decided to test her. "What is 9 multiplied by 8? 72. What is the capital of Nigeria?" "Abuja." "What is the opposite of generous?" "Selfish." His eyebrows lifted slightly. He asked another question, then another, then another. History, English, mathematics, basic science. Adebimpe answered nearly everyone correctly. Not perfectly, but astonishingly well for someone who had never attended school. Chief Olumide stared at her in disbelief. "Who teaches you?" She smiled shyly. "The teachers." He frowned. "I don't understand." "I listen from outside." The old educator felt his heart tighten. "Only from outside," she nodded. "And old newspapers. And broken books people throw away. And anything I can find." For several seconds he could not speak. He had spent more than 40 years in education. He had taught thousands of children. He knew talent when he saw it. But this was different. This child had built an education out of scraps. Without classrooms, without teachers, without books, without anyone believing she deserved to learn. He noticed charcoal stains covering her fingertips. "What are those?" She smiled nervously. "I write on old cement bags." "So you practice every night?" "Yes, sir." "After finishing your chores?" Another nod. "What chores?" "I clean. I cook. I fetch water. I work on the farm. I wash clothes." The list seemed endless, yet she described every task without bitterness. Only acceptance. Chief Olumide looked toward the distant road leading back to the village. "Does your family know you come here?" "No, sir." "And if they found out, they would stop me." The old man took a slow breath. He suddenly understood why the little girl always stood outside the school fence instead of walking through the gate. She was not avoiding the classrooms. She believed she did not have the right to enter them. That realization broke something inside him. For the first time in many years, Chief Olumide felt both profound admiration and deep sorrow at exactly the same moment. He looked back at Adebimpe, whose eyes still sparkled with quiet determination, despite everything life had denied her. In that instant, he made a silent decision. No child blessed with such extraordinary determination should be left to fight alone. Whatever it required, he would find a way to give Adebimpe the opportunity she deserved. Neither of them realized that this simple conversation beneath an old mango tree would become the turning point that changed not only Adebimpe's future, but the lives of everyone connected to her. Chief Olumide Adeyemi could not stop thinking about Adebimpe. For more than 40 years, he had dedicated his life to education. He had taught children from wealthy families, children from poor farming villages, children who loved learning and children who only attended school because their parents insisted. But never, not once, had he met a child who had taught herself almost everything by standing outside classroom windows. The image followed him everywhere. A little girl with worn sandals, charcoal-stained fingers, eyes filled with curiosity instead of resentment. That evening, he sat alone on the veranda of his modest bungalow, staring across the quiet village as the sun disappeared behind the palm trees. His wife, Mama Foleke, placed a cup of hot tea beside him. "You've hardly spoken since you came home." Chief Olumide nodded slowly. "I met a remarkable child today." His wife smiled. "You've said that many times over the years." "No. This one is different." He told her everything. About the discarded notebooks, the secret lessons outside the classroom, the endless chores, the intelligence hidden beneath years of neglect. Mama Folake listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sighed deeply. "Some children fight for education. Others are denied even the chance to dream." Chief Olumide looked into the distance. If no one helps her now, her talent will disappear forever. The next morning, he returned to the school earlier than usual. He waited beneath the same mango tree. Almost an hour passed before Adebimpe appeared, balancing a basket of tomatoes on her head. She immediately recognized him. "Good morning, sir." "Good morning, Adebimpe. Have you come to inspect the school?" He smiled. "Partly. And partly because I hoped to see you." She lowered her eyes respectfully. "I must deliver these vegetables. I won't keep you long." He reached into a leather bag beside him and removed 3 worn textbooks, an English reader, a mathematics workbook, a basic science book. Their covers were faded, and several pages had been repaired with tape. "They belonged to one of my former students. I think they deserve a new owner." Adebimpe stared at the books without moving. "Sir, they're for you." Her lips parted slightly. "For me? Yes. I can't pay. I didn't ask you to." Tears immediately filled her eyes. She carefully accepted the books as though they were made of glass. "No one has ever given me books before." Chief Olumide smiled gently. "Then let these be the first." She hugged them tightly against her chest. "I will take care of them. I know you will." Before leaving, he asked one final question. "If someone taught you properly, would you work hard?" She looked almost confused. "I already work hard." The old man laughed softly. "I believe you do." "No, I mean at school." Adebimpe answered without hesitation. "I would study until I became someone my parents could be proud of." The words caught him by surprise. "Your parents? The ones who died?" She smiled sadly. "I still want them to be proud." Chief Olumide watched her disappear down the dusty road. His determination grew even stronger. Over the following weeks, he quietly became Adebimpe's secret teacher. Every Saturday afternoon, after she finished selling produce at the market, she met him beneath the old mango tree. He never entered the Akinyemi compound. He knew doing so might create unnecessary conflict. Instead, he taught wherever they could avoid attention, sometimes beneath the mango tree, sometimes beside an abandoned church, sometimes under a large baobab tree overlooking the fields. Each lesson lasted barely an hour, but Adebimpe absorbed knowledge like dry soil drinking rain. What is a fraction?" She understood after one explanation. "What is the past tense of right?" She remembered immediately. "What causes rainfall?" She answered correctly the following week without reviewing her notes. Chief Olumide soon realized he rarely needed to repeat himself. Her memory was extraordinary, her curiosity endless. She constantly asked questions. Why do stars shine? How do airplanes stay in the sky? Who decided English spelling? What makes plants grow faster? Every answer led to 3 more questions. Teaching her reminded him why he had become an educator in the first place. One afternoon, while reviewing mathematics, he closed the workbook. Adebimpe. Yes, sir. Have you ever heard of the National Excellence Scholarship? She shook her head. No. It is one of the most competitive scholarships in Nigeria. What does it do? It pays everything. School fees, books, uniform, accommodation. She stared at him. Everything. Everything. She slowly looked back at the ground. Children like me don't receive things like that. Chief Olumide leaned forward. Children like you are exactly who should. But I don't even attend school. That doesn't mean you aren't capable. She remained silent. The possibility seemed too impossible to imagine. Several days later, Chief Olumide visited the district education office. Large posters hung across the entrance. National Excellence, Scholarship Examination, open to exceptional students entering secondary education. Application deadline 3 weeks. He collected every brochure available. Then he spent the evening reading every requirement carefully. Academic ability, entrance examination, recommendation, proof of need. Everything pointed toward Adebimpe. Everything except one obstacle: parental approval. Without consent from her legal guardians, she could not participate. The next afternoon, Chief Olumide decided to visit the Akinyemi home. Ronke welcomed him politely. Chief Olumide, what an honor. What brings you here? I'd like to speak with you and Adewale. Minutes later, everyone gathered beneath the shaded veranda. Chief Olumide spoke calmly. I have become acquainted with Adebimpe. Ronke's smile immediately faded. Oh, she is an exceptionally gifted child. Neither parent responded. There is a scholarship examination next month. I believe she has an excellent chance. Silence. Finally, Adewale folded his arms. Scholarship, yes. It covers all educational expenses. Ronke laughed quietly. Who will fetch water? Chief Olumide blinked. I'm sorry. If she leaves, who will cook? Who will wash clothes? Who will help on the farm? Adewale nodded. We depend on her. Chief Olumide kept his voice calm. She deserves an education. Our own children already attend school. We cannot lose another pair of hands. It will cost you nothing. It will cost us work. The retired principal tried once more. This child has remarkable potential. Ronke's expression hardened. Potential doesn't harvest cassava. Chief Olumide realized reason alone would not change their minds. He stood slowly. I understand your concerns. No, Adewale replied firmly. I don't think you do. We have made our decision. Adebimpe will not take that examination. As Chief Olumide walked away, disappointment weighed heavily on his shoulders. For the first time since meeting Adebimpe, he felt powerless. How could he save a future when those legally responsible for the child refused to see her worth? That evening, Adebimpe noticed his unusual silence during their lesson. Did something happen? He hesitated. Then he told her the truth. Her smile slowly disappeared. So? They said no. He nodded. She looked down at the mathematics book resting in her lap. I thought they would. She spoke without anger, only quiet acceptance. Chief Olumide watched her for several moments. Then he made the most difficult decision of his life. If one door closes, sometimes another must be opened. He looked directly into her eyes. Adebimpe, I'm going to prepare you for that scholarship examination anyway. She stared at him in disbelief. But they said no. I know. Oh, what if they find out? They won't. Her heart began beating faster. For the first time, the impossible no longer seemed completely impossible. It was dangerous. It was risky. But somewhere deep inside, hope quietly came alive again. The following morning, Adebimpe woke long before the first rooster crowed. The village was still wrapped in darkness as she quietly rose from the thin mat on the floor of the storage room. She folded her blanket, splashed cold water across her face, and hurried outside before Ronke could call her. She had learned one important lesson over the years. If she wanted even a few minutes for herself, she had to earn them before everyone else opened their eyes. She swept the compound. She fetched 2 heavy buckets of water from the borehole. She lit the firewood stove. She washed yesterday's cooking pots. She peeled yam for breakfast. By the time Ronke stepped outside, nearly every chore had already been completed. Ronke looked around with surprise. "You finished already?" "Yes, Mama." There was no praise, only another instruction. "Go feed the goats." "Yes, Mama." Adebimpe obeyed without complaint, but inside her heart, something had changed. For the first time in years, she carried a secret that no one in the family knew. Every spare moment now belonged to one purpose: the scholarship examination. That afternoon, after delivering vegetables to the market, she met Chief Olumide beneath the old baobab tree instead of the mango tree near the school. "We should change places sometimes," he explained. "The fewer people who notice us, the better." Adebimpe nodded. "I understand." The retired principal opened a worn leather folder. Inside were old examination papers collected over many years. "These are similar to the questions you may face." She stared at the pages. "There are so many." "There are. But we still have 3 weeks." He smiled. "And I have never met a student who learns as quickly as you." For the next 2 hours they worked without stopping. English comprehension, vocabulary, mathematics, logical reasoning, general knowledge. Whenever Adebimpe made a mistake, she immediately wanted to understand why. She never memorized answers blindly. She insisted on understanding every idea completely. Chief Olumide noticed something else. She never became frustrated. Even difficult questions only made her more determined. As the sun began to set, he closed the notebook. "Excellent work." She smiled shyly. "I still answered some questions incorrectly." "Yes. But today you answered more correctly than yesterday. That is what progress looks like." She carefully packed the borrowed books into her cloth bag. "I'll study tonight." "Don't forget to sleep." She laughed softly. "I'll sleep after I finish." The old man shook his head with affection. "You remind me too much of myself." Over the following days, Adebimpe lived 2 completely different lives. During daylight hours, she remained the obedient adopted daughter everyone expected. She harvested cassava. She carried firewood. She cooked meals. She scrubbed floors until her fingers ached. She washed piles of clothing beside the river. Whenever visitors arrived, Ronke called her immediately. "Adebimpe, bring water." "Adebimpe, wash these plates." "Adebimpe, clean the courtyard." She answered every call. "Yes, Mama." No one noticed that she had begun carrying small folded pieces of paper inside her dress pocket. While waiting for water to boil, she reviewed English vocabulary. While goats grazed, she practiced multiplication tables, while vegetables cooked over the fire. She quietly repeated science definitions under her breath. Knowledge slowly became part of every ordinary task. Night belonged to study. After everyone slept, she lit the tiny kerosene lamp once again. The flame was weak. The room was hot. Mosquitoes buzzed constantly around her face. Still, she continued reading. Sometimes until midnight, sometimes later. One evening, Tunde woke to drink water and noticed light beneath the storage room door. Curious, he pushed it open. Adebimpe quickly covered her books. "What are you hiding?" "Nothing." He stepped inside. "You've been reading?" She remained silent. He picked up one of the mathematics books. "Where did you get this?" "A friend." "What friend?" She hesitated. "A teacher." Tunde frowned. "You shouldn't be studying." "Why? You don't need school." "I only want to learn." He shrugged carelessly. "You're wasting your time." He tossed the book back onto the floor before walking away. The words hurt, but not as much as she expected, because deep inside she no longer believed them. 1 week before the examination, Chief Olumide gave her a full practice test. "Today," he said, "pretend this is the real examination. No interruptions. No questions. No help." She nodded. "I understand." For nearly 3 hours she worked silently beneath the shade of the baobab tree. Only birdsong and the rustling leaves interrupted the quiet. When she finally handed back the papers, Chief Olumide spent almost 30 minutes marking every answer. The longer he remained silent, the more nervous Adebimpe became. Finally, he looked up. "You passed." Her eyes widened. "Really? Not only passed. You scored higher than many students who attend excellent private schools." She covered her mouth in disbelief. "I did. You certainly did." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then tears slowly filled her eyes. "I never thought—" She stopped herself. Chief Olumide smiled warmly. "What?" "I never thought I was actually smart." The old man's expression softened. "Adebimpe, you were never the problem. You simply weren't given the opportunity." Those words settled deeply into her heart. For years, she had believed something might be wrong with her. Why else would no one think she deserved school? Now, for the first time, she understood the truth. Her circumstances had limited her, not her ability. 3 days before the examination, disaster nearly struck. Ronke entered the storage room unexpectedly while searching for an old cooking pot. She noticed the stack of textbooks beneath the sleeping mat. Her eyes narrowed immediately. "What are these?" Adebimpe's heart almost stopped. "They're—" Ronke pulled out every book. Mathematics, English, science, exercise papers. Her face darkened. "Where did you steal these?" "I didn't steal them." "Then who gave them to you?" Adebimpe hesitated. She had promised never to involve Chief Olumide. They belonged to someone. Ronke threw one book onto the floor. "You have time for reading." "But yesterday you forgot to clean the back fence." "I'm sorry." "You should be." She picked up another book. "What nonsense is this?" Without warning, she tossed it toward the fire burning outside the kitchen. Adebimpe gasped. She ran forward just in time to pull the book away before the pages caught fire. Ronke stared coldly at her. "If I ever see these again, I'll burn every single one." She walked away without another word. Adebimpe stood frozen. Her hands trembled. The corner of the science book had already turned black from the heat. Carefully, she brushed away the ashes. Then she hugged the books tightly against her chest. That evening, she met Chief Olumide with tears in her eyes. "I almost lost everything." He quietly examined the scorched book. Then he smiled gently. "It survived." "So will you." She nodded slowly. "The examination is in 3 days." "I know." "Are you afraid?" She thought carefully before answering. "Yes, but I'm more afraid of never trying." Chief Olumide looked at her with pride. "That answer tells me you're ready." As they prepared to leave, he handed her a neatly folded envelope. Inside was an official examination admission slip bearing her name. For the first time, Adebimpe saw her own name printed on an official document connected to education. She ran her fingers gently across the paper. It felt almost unreal. In just 3 days, the adopted daughter who had spent years learning from outside classroom windows would finally sit inside one. Whether she succeeded or failed, one thing had already changed forever. She was no longer invisible. The morning of the scholarship examination arrived with a quiet drizzle. Dark clouds hung low over the village, and the cool air carried the smell of wet earth. Most people welcomed the rain because it promised a better harvest, but Adebimpe barely noticed it. She had barely slept. The admission slip lay hidden inside the lining of her old cloth bag. She had checked it so many times during the night that the edges had begun to soften. Today would determine whether years of silent determination meant anything, or whether her dream would end before it had truly begun. As always, Ronke woke her before dawn. Adebimpe. Yes, Mama. The rain doesn't mean the work disappears. No, Mama. She hurried outside. The courtyard was muddy. She swept away soaked leaves. She fed the chickens. She fetched water despite the slippery road. She cleaned the cooking pots while rainwater dripped steadily from the roof. Every minute felt painfully slow. She kept glancing toward the sky. The examination was scheduled to begin at 9 o'clock in Ibadan, nearly an hour away by bus. If she missed it, there would be no second chance. After breakfast, Ronke handed her another basket. Take these vegetables to the market. Adebimpe froze. Mama, what? Her voice almost disappeared. I don't feel well. Ronke frowned. You looked healthy enough a moment ago. My head hurts. Ronke stepped closer and touched her forehead. You don't have a fever. Adebimpe remained silent. Ronke thrust the basket into her hands. Stop making excuses. The customers won't wait. Adebimpe lowered her head. Yes, Mama. She walked toward the market with the heavy basket balanced carefully on her head. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the market entrance, she looked around anxiously. Chief Olumide had told her exactly what to do. Sell whatever she could as quickly as possible. Then meet him behind the old pharmacy at 8 o'clock. She hurried from customer to customer. Fresh tomatoes, cassava flour, palm oil. Normally, she waited patiently for buyers. Today, she accepted the first reasonable offer every time. An elderly woman smiled. You seem to be in a hurry today. I have somewhere important to be. Within 40 minutes, almost everything had been sold. She tucked the money safely into the basket and ran toward the pharmacy. Chief Olumide was already waiting beside an old blue taxi. You made it. I sold everything. Excellent. He opened the taxi door. Get in. As the vehicle pulled away from the market, Adebimpe stared nervously through the window. I've never been this far from the village. You'll travel much farther one day. She smiled uncertainly. I hope so. The examination center occupied a large secondary school in central Ibadan. Hundreds of students filled the courtyard. Most arrived wearing neat uniforms from prestigious schools. Many carried expensive backpacks. Parents stood beside them offering encouragement. Some students revised thick textbooks one last time. Others discussed difficult mathematics problems. Adebimpe quietly looked down at her faded dress and worn sandals. For a moment, doubt crept back into her heart. I don't belong here. Chief Olumide heard her. He stopped walking and faced her. Look around. She did. What do you see? Students. And they're smarter than I am. He smiled gently. No, you only think that because of what you're wearing. He pointed toward her chest. Knowledge doesn't live inside expensive uniforms. It lives here. She slowly placed one hand over her heart. You earned your place. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Those words steadied her breathing. Together they walked toward the registration table. A volunteer checked her admission slip. Adebimpe Akinyemi. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Legally, she carried her adoptive family's surname. Yes. Room 7. The volunteer handed her a candidate number. Good luck. She whispered, Thank you. Inside room 7, rows of wooden desks stretched across the classroom. Nearly 50 students filled the room. Most glanced curiously at the quietly dressed girl entering alone. Several looked away almost immediately. One boy sitting near the window whispered to his friend, She looks like she came from a farm. His friend laughed softly. Adebimpe heard them. She simply walked to her assigned desk. Chief Olumide had taught her something even more valuable than mathematics. Never allow another person's opinion to become your limitation. The invigilator entered promptly at 9. Good morning, candidates. The room immediately fell silent. You are about to sit for the National Excellence Scholarship Examination. You have 3 hours. Read every instruction carefully. No talking. No cheating. If you finish early, remain seated. Answer booklets were distributed. Then the question papers. Adebimpe took one slow breath before turning the first page. English language. The comprehension passage discussed environmental conservation. She smiled. She had read something similar in an old newspaper months earlier. Her pencil moved steadily. Question after question. Sentence after sentence. She never rushed. She never panicked. When English ended, mathematics followed. Fractions, percentages, algebra, geometry. Some questions required careful thinking. Others felt surprisingly familiar. She remembered solving nearly identical problems beneath the baobab tree with Chief Olumide. Whenever uncertainty appeared, she closed her eyes briefly. Not to guess, to think. The final section covered general knowledge and logical reasoning. Halfway through, she noticed several students becoming restless. One asked for extra paper. Another sighed loudly. Someone dropped a pencil. None of it distracted her. For years she had studied beside noisy markets, crowing roosters, crying babies, and barking dogs. Silence had never been necessary for learning. 3 hours passed quickly. Stop writing. The invigilator collected every answer booklet. As Adebimpe handed hers over, an unexpected feeling washed across her. Relief. Whatever happened now, she had given everything she had. Outside the classroom, Chief Olumide waited beneath a large tree. The moment he saw her, he smiled. How was it? She thought carefully. There were difficult questions. I expected that. But she smiled for the first time all day. I answered them. He laughed warmly. I knew you would. They celebrated with something simple. 2 meat pies from a roadside bakery, a bottle of orange soda. For Adebimpe, it felt like a feast. She had never celebrated an academic achievement before. As they prepared to return home, Chief Olumide became serious. From this moment forward, your job is finished. My job? You worked hard. You prepared honestly. You sat the examination. The result is no longer in your hands. She nodded. I understand. But remember something. No matter what the letter says, you have already proven that your circumstances do not define your ability. His words remained with her throughout the journey home. By late afternoon, she returned to the village, carrying the empty basket from the market. Ronke barely looked at her. You're late. I'm sorry, Mama. Go prepare dinner. Yes, Mama. No one asked where she had truly been. No one suspected that while they believed she had spent the day selling vegetables, she had quietly taken the first step toward changing her entire life. Days turned into weeks. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. Chores, farm work, cooking, cleaning. Yet something inside Adebimpe had changed forever. Every evening she found herself wondering the same question. Had she done enough? Then, one hot afternoon nearly a month later, a motorcycle stopped outside the Akinyemi compound. The rider carried an official envelope stamped with the logo of the National Education Board. A letter for Adebimpe Akinyemi. Ronke frowned. A letter. Adebimpe stepped forward cautiously. My name is Adebimpe. The messenger handed her the envelope. Her hands trembled as she stared at it. She knew that inside those few folded pages lay the answer to every prayer she had whispered in silence for years. For several long seconds, Adebimpe simply stared at the envelope in her hands. The official seal of the National Education Board seemed almost unreal. Her fingers trembled so badly that she was afraid she might tear the paper before even opening it. Ronke frowned impatiently. Well, what are you waiting for? Open it. Adebimpe swallowed hard. Yes, Mama. She carefully broke the seal. Inside was a neatly folded letter bearing the government logo. Her eyes quickly searched for the most important words. Then she stopped breathing. Congratulations. The word blurred as tears instantly filled her eyes. She blinked several times before continuing. Has been awarded a full National Excellence Scholarship. Tuition accommodation books, uniforms, meals. Fully funded. She could read no further. Her knees weakened. She clutched the letter tightly against her chest. She had done it. Everything she had dreamed about while standing outside classroom windows had suddenly become possible. The messenger smiled warmly. Congratulations. You were among the highest performing candidates. You should be proud. Adebimpe whispered, Thank you. The messenger climbed back onto his motorcycle and disappeared down the dusty road. Silence settled over the compound. For one brief moment, Adebimpe hoped her family might celebrate with her. Perhaps now they would finally see her differently. Perhaps now they would understand. She slowly looked toward Adewale and Ronke. Neither of them smiled. Instead, Ronke reached for the letter. Let me see. She read every page carefully. Her expression became darker with every sentence. Finally, she folded the letter and handed it back. So, you really passed? Yes, Mama. Another long silence followed. Adewale leaned against the veranda railing. When do they expect you to leave? Adebimpe looked back at the letter. Orientation begins in 3 weeks. Ronke immediately shook her head. No. Adebimpe blinked. No? You aren't going. She felt as though she had misheard. But I received the scholarship. I know exactly what you received. Ronke folded her arms. You still aren't leaving. Adebimpe stared at her. Why? Because this house needs you. You already have Tunde and Yetunde. They're busy. Yes, they study. I can still help during holidays. Ronke laughed bitterly. Who will wash clothes every day? Who will cook? Who will clean? Who will fetch water? Every question landed like another stone on Adebimpe's heart. She looked toward Adewale. Surely he would understand. Baba! He avoided her eyes. Your mother has spoken. The hope inside her began to crack. But the scholarship pays for everything. We aren't discussing money. I'm discussing my future. Adewale finally looked directly at her. Your future is here. Those 4 words shattered something deep inside her. For years she had accepted hard work. She had accepted hunger. She had accepted loneliness. But hearing someone decide that she deserved no future beyond endless labor hurt more than anything else. That evening, after finishing every chore, she quietly walked to the baobab tree. Chief Olumide was already waiting. The moment he saw her face, he understood. They refused. She nodded silently. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, he sighed. I feared this might happen. They said I belong in that house. They said my future is there. The old man remained calm. And what do you believe? She looked at the scholarship letter. I believe. God didn't give me this opportunity just to watch it disappear. Chief Olumide smiled gently. Good. Because neither do I. The following day, he visited the Akinyemi family once again. This time he carried official scholarship documents, brochures, and letters from the education board. Everything clearly explained that the scholarship would cost the family absolutely nothing. He sat respectfully beneath the veranda. Adewale. Ronke. I've come because this opportunity is extraordinary. Ronke remained expressionless. We've already made our decision. Please, at least hear me out. Reluctantly, they agreed. Chief Olumide spoke with patience. This scholarship covers every expense. You will not pay school fees. You will not buy books. You will not buy uniforms. You will not even pay for meals. There is no financial burden. Adewale answered quietly. You don't understand. Help me understand. Our farm depends on labor. Tunde is preparing for university. Yetunde has examinations. Adebimpe does everything else. Chief Olumide looked directly at him. So because she works hard, she should never receive an education, Ronke responded immediately. Someone must make sacrifices. The retired principal shook his head slowly. Parents are supposed to sacrifice for children, not children sacrificing their futures for adults. The conversation grew tense. Adewale's voice hardened. Chief, we respect you, but this is our family. Our decision is final. Chief Olumide remained silent for a moment. Then he stood. I have spent my entire life teaching children. I know what potential looks like. If you deny this girl an education, you will regret it for the rest of your lives. Ronke answered coldly. We'll take that risk. The old educator walked away with a heavy heart. That evening he met Adebimpe once again. She listened quietly as he described the conversation. They won't change. No. What should I do? He looked toward the distant sunset. Then he asked one simple question. What do you truly want? She answered immediately. I want to learn. I want to become someone who helps others. I don't want another child to live like this. His eyes softened. Then, perhaps, it is time to make the hardest decision of your life. She understood what he meant. Leave. The very thought frightened her. She had nowhere else to go. No money, no relatives, no certainty. Only a scholarship. And hope. For 3 nights she barely slept. Every possibility frightened her. If she stayed, her dream would die. If she left, she might never see the only family she had known again, even if they had never truly accepted her. On the 4th morning, something unexpected happened. Tunde overheard another argument between his parents. He quietly followed Adebimpe outside. I heard everything. She remained silent. They'll never let you go. I know. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a few crumpled naira notes. This is all I have. She looked at him in surprise. I can't take your money. You can. Why? He looked away. I never treated you like a sister. I know. I should have. He placed the money into her hand. I'm sorry. Before she could answer, he walked back toward the house. It wasn't enough money to change her life, but it was the first genuine kindness he had ever shown her. That night, Yetunde quietly entered the storage room. Without saying a word, she placed a small cloth bundle beside Adebimpe. Inside were 2 dresses, a pair of sandals, a small towel. "You'll need these." Adebimpe looked up. "You knew," Yetunde nodded. "I think you're going to leave." Tears filled Adebimpe's eyes. "I don't want to leave like this." "I know, but staying won't change anything." The sisters looked at one another in silence. Neither knew whether they would ever meet again. Before leaving, Yetunde whispered, "I hope you become everything they said you never could." As dawn approached the next morning, Adebimpe folded her scholarship letter, packed the donated books from Chief Olumide, the few clothes Yetunde had given her, and Tunde's small gift of money into her worn cloth bag. She quietly looked around the storage room one final time. It had never truly been a home, but it had sheltered her through the hardest years of her life. Outside, the first birds began to sing. A new chapter was waiting. All she had to do now was find the courage to take the first step. The first rays of sunlight spread across the village as Adebimpe quietly stepped out of the storage room for the last time. She carried only one small cloth bag over her shoulder. Inside were 2 worn dresses, a pair of second-hand sandals, the 3 textbooks Chief Olumide had given her, the scholarship letter, and the few crumpled Naira notes Tunde had secretly placed in her hand. Everything she owned in the world fit inside that single bag. She paused at the edge of the compound. The familiar mud house stood silently behind her. For years, she had dreamed of leaving. Now that the moment had arrived, her feet refused to move. She whispered a quiet prayer. "Lord, please help me become the person you created me to be." Then she turned toward the dusty road. Chief Olumide was waiting beside an old pickup truck borrowed from a friend. When he saw her approaching, he smiled warmly. "You came." "I almost didn't." "That's normal." She climbed into the passenger seat. As the truck pulled away, Adebimpe looked back through the rear window. The village slowly disappeared behind the morning mist. She wondered whether she would ever return. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, Chief Olumide broke the silence. "Are you afraid?" She nodded honestly. "Very." "Good." She looked at him in surprise. "Good. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward despite fear." She quietly repeated his words, choosing to move forward. The journey to the Scholarship Academy took several hours. For Adebimpe, every kilometer revealed something she had never seen before: busy highways, tall buildings, large markets, traffic lights. She pressed her forehead gently against the window, absorbing every new sight. "It feels like another world." Chief Olumide smiled. "It is. And now it's part of your world too." By midday, they arrived at the Government Leadership Academy, a prestigious boarding secondary school known throughout Nigeria. The campus looked enormous. Red brick academic buildings stood neatly beside wide green lawns. Students wearing crisp uniforms walked confidently between classrooms. A large library overlooked a central courtyard filled with flowering trees. Everything seemed impossibly beautiful. Adebimpe tightened her grip on the cloth bag. "I've never seen a school like this. You've earned the right to be here." At the administration office, a receptionist greeted them politely. "Welcome." "Name: Adebimpe Akinyemi." The receptionist searched the computer before smiling. "Congratulations. You were one of the highest-ranked scholarship recipients this year." Adebimpe blinked. "One of the highest?" "Yes." "Your examination results were exceptional." For a moment, she could not find any words. Chief Olumide simply smiled with quiet pride. Soon, another staff member escorted her across the campus. "This is the girls' residence. Your classroom is in the East Building. The dining hall opens at 6. The library closes at 9. Every sentence felt unreal. Library, dormitory, study hall. Words she had only imagined while standing outside classroom windows. Her dormitory contained 6 beds. 5 girls had already arrived. Most wore fashionable clothes and expensive wristwatches. Several chatted excitedly about private schools they had previously attended. One girl glanced at Adebimpe's faded bag. "Is that all your luggage?" Adebimpe smiled politely. "Yes." Another girl whispered quietly enough that she thought no one would hear. "Maybe she's from one of those remote villages." Several girls laughed softly. Adebimpe unpacked without responding. She had heard similar whispers before. They no longer frightened her. That evening, every new student gathered in the assembly hall. The principal welcomed them warmly. "You are here because someone recognized extraordinary potential in each of you. Never forget that." As applause filled the room, Adebimpe quietly looked around. For the first time in her life, she sat among students who all loved learning. It felt almost unbelievable. Classes began the following Monday. The pace shocked her immediately. Teachers spoke quickly. Assignments arrived every day. Science laboratories contained equipment she had never imagined. Computer lessons introduced technology she had never touched before. The library contained thousands of books. Sometimes she wandered slowly between the shelves, simply reading titles. One afternoon, the librarian smiled. "Can I help you find something?" Adebimpe looked around in amazement. "I don't know where to begin." The librarian laughed kindly. "Here. That's one of the happiest problems a reader can have." She borrowed 3 books that very day: history, English literature, biology. Every night she studied until the dormitory lights turned off. Sometimes she continued reading beneath a blanket, using a small rechargeable flashlight. Her classmates noticed. "Adebimpe, don't you ever rest?" she smiled. "I rested for many years. Now I want to learn." Within a month, teachers began recognizing her remarkable discipline. Mr. Okafor, her mathematics teacher, stopped beside her desk after class. "Excellent solution. You solved today's problem differently." "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Your method was actually more efficient." Another teacher praised her essays. The biology instructor admired her careful observations during laboratory sessions. Little by little, confidence replaced uncertainty. Yet, life at the academy was not without challenges. Some students looked down on scholarship recipients. One afternoon during lunch, a wealthy classmate named Sandra laughed while examining Adebimpe's carefully repaired notebook. "You still use notebooks like this?" "It still works," Sandra smirked. "My family throws away better ones than that." Several students laughed. Adebimpe quietly continued eating. Another scholarship student sitting nearby leaned closer. "Why didn't you answer her?" She smiled gently. "I didn't come here to win arguments. I came here to change my life." The girl nodded thoughtfully. From that day forward, the two became close friends. Her name was Zainab. Like Adebimpe, she came from a humble background and understood what opportunity truly meant. They studied together every evening, encouraged one another before examinations, shared textbooks whenever necessary. Instead of competing, they helped each other improve. Months passed quickly. At the end of the first term, examination results were posted on the main notice board. Dozens of students crowded around. Excited voices filled the hallway. Adebimpe waited quietly until the crowd became smaller. Then she stepped forward. Her eyes searched the list. Number 1, Adebimpe Akinyemi. Average, score 96%. She stared at the paper in disbelief. Zainab screamed happily. "You did it!" Several teachers smiled proudly. Even students who had once ignored her looked surprised. Mr. Okafor shook her hand. "Congratulations." I expected you to perform well. But this is extraordinary. That evening, the principal invited her to his office. I've reviewed your academic record. You are setting an excellent example. He handed her a certificate recognizing outstanding academic performance. I hope this encourages you. Adebimpe accepted it with both hands. Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you. After leaving the office, she walked alone across the quiet campus beneath a sky filled with stars. She remembered the little girl who had once stood outside classroom windows, listening through the fence. That child had dreamed of entering a classroom. Now she stood at the top of one of Nigeria's finest schools. Tears slowly filled her eyes, not because the journey had become easy, but because she finally understood something Chief Olumide had tried to teach her from the very beginning. Talent can be ignored, opportunity can be delayed, dreams can be discouraged, but when determination refuses to surrender, even the longest road can eventually lead to a place that once seemed impossible. Holding her certificate close to her heart, Adebimpe silently promised herself that this achievement would never become the destination. It would only be the beginning of a far greater purpose. 3 years passed more quickly than Adebimpe had ever imagined. The frightened girl who had arrived at the Government Leadership Academy carrying a single cloth bag gradually became one of its brightest students. She graduated at the top of her class. Her outstanding results earned her another full scholarship, this time to study business administration and economics at one of Nigeria's leading universities in Lagos. When the admission letter arrived, the first person she thought about was Chief Olumide. He smiled proudly as he held the letter. I knew this day would come. Adebimpe laughed softly. You always believed in me, even before I believed in myself. The old educator shook his head. I simply recognized what was already there. You did the hard work. Before leaving for Lagos, Adebimpe visited the mango tree outside the village school where they had first met. She stood quietly beneath its branches. I used to stand over there, she said, pointing toward the old fence. I was afraid to come inside. Chief Olumide smiled. And now, she looked toward the classrooms. Now I know no child should ever believe education belongs only to someone else. The university in Lagos felt even larger than the academy. Towering lecture halls, modern laboratories, students from every region of Nigeria. For the first few weeks, Adebimpe struggled to adjust. Many of her classmates came from wealthy families. Some drove expensive cars to campus. Others discussed international vacations and private secondary schools. She still carefully counted every naira she spent. Even though her scholarship covered tuition accommodation and books, she refused to waste money. She repaired old clothes instead of buying new ones. She ate simple meals. She saved every small allowance she received. Her roommate Kioma noticed one evening, You never buy anything unnecessary. Adebimpe smiled. I know what it's like to have nothing. I don't want to forget that. University life demanded even greater discipline. Lectures began early. Assignments became more complex. Research papers filled her weekends. Group projects often continued late into the evening. Some students complained constantly. Adebimpe never did. Compared with carrying buckets of water before sunrise and working in cassava fields all day, studying in an air-conditioned library felt like a privilege. Her professors soon recognized her determination. Professor Ibrahim, who taught economics, stopped her after class one afternoon. Adebimpe. Yes, Professor. I've read your research paper. She immediately became nervous. I'm sorry if I made mistakes. He smiled. You made very few. In fact, I believe you should submit this to the National Undergraduate Research Competition. She stared at him. My paper. Yes. I don't think it's good enough. I do. Encouraged by his confidence, she submitted the paper. Several months later, she received extraordinary news. Her research had won first place nationwide. The prize included a generous cash award and an internship with one of Nigeria's fastest-growing investment firms. It was her first real opportunity to enter the business world. On her first day at the firm, she wore the only professional outfit she owned, a simple navy blue suit purchased from a second-hand shop. She polished her shoes until they looked almost new. As she entered the company's glass headquarters, she felt the same mixture of excitement and nervousness she had experienced on her first day at the academy. The office buzzed with activity. Employees moved confidently between meeting rooms. Large digital screens displayed financial reports and market updates. Everything seemed fast. Everything seemed important. Her supervisor, Mrs. Adebimpe, greeted her warmly. "Welcome, Adebimpe. I've heard wonderful things about you." "Thank you, ma'am. You'll work directly with our strategy team." "I'll do my best." "You already are." During the internship, Adebimpe quickly distinguished herself. She arrived before everyone else. She stayed late whenever necessary. She asked thoughtful questions instead of pretending to know everything. Most importantly, she listened. She studied how experienced professionals analyzed problems. She learned how businesses expanded. She discovered how investments created jobs. Every lesson fascinated her. One afternoon, the company faced an unexpected challenge. A major client planned to cancel an important contract because of declining sales in one region. Several senior managers debated possible solutions for hours. Adebimpe quietly reviewed the market data. Then she noticed something everyone else had overlooked. Sales were not declining everywhere. They were growing rapidly in nearby rural communities that competitors had ignored. She hesitated before raising her hand. Mrs. Bello noticed. "Yes, Adebimpe. I may have an idea." The room became silent. She carefully explained her observations. If the company expands distribution into underserved rural markets instead of reducing investment, I believe revenue will recover. Some executives looked skeptical. Others asked detailed questions. She answered each one calmly using data. Finally, the managing director spoke. "Let's test her proposal." 3 months later, the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The company not only retained the client, but increased overall profits. Mrs. Bello called Adebimpe into her office. "You've impressed everyone." "I simply shared what I noticed." That's exactly what leaders do. When graduation approached, several companies offered her employment. She carefully considered every opportunity. Salary mattered, but purpose mattered more. She eventually accepted a position with the same investment firm where she had interned because they valued innovation and ethical leadership. The years that followed demanded relentless effort. She worked harder than ever. She volunteered for difficult assignments. She continued studying during evenings, earning additional professional certifications. She traveled across Nigeria, helping businesses expand into underserved communities. Each promotion brought greater responsibility. Analyst, senior analyst, project manager, regional director. Every achievement strengthened her confidence. Yet she never forgot the girl who once studied from discarded newspapers. Whenever new interns joined the company, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, she made time to encourage them. "You belong here," she often said. "Never let your past convince you otherwise." Her reputation grew steadily. Clients trusted her. Colleagues respected her. Executives valued her judgment. One afternoon, nearly 12 years after leaving the Akinyemi household, the company's chairman invited her to a private meeting. "Adebimpe." "Yes, sir." "We're creating a new division focused on sustainable investment and community development." She listened attentively. "We need someone capable of building it from the ground up." He smiled. The board has chosen you. She looked genuinely surprised. Me. You've consistently delivered outstanding results. You understand both business and ordinary people. That combination is rare. She accepted the position with gratitude. Under her leadership, the division expanded rapidly. They invested in agricultural technology, supported small businesses, created employment opportunities in rural communities. Profits increased alongside positive social impact. Business magazines began publishing articles about her innovative leadership. Television programs invited her for interviews. Professional organizations presented leadership awards. Although recognition followed her everywhere, she remained remarkably humble. Whenever journalists asked about the secret to her success, she never spoke first about intelligence or ambition. Instead, she always gave the same answer. Someone believed in me before the world did. As the years passed, the company's founders prepared for retirement. The board of directors searched for a new chief executive officer. Candidates came from across Africa. Experienced executives with impressive resumes competed for the position. After months of careful evaluation, the board reached a unanimous decision. The announcement was made during the company's annual shareholders meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce the next chief executive officer of our organization. Applause filled the conference hall. Adebimpe slowly walked onto the stage. For a brief moment, she remembered carrying water before sunrise, standing outside classroom windows, studying beneath the light of a tiny kerosene lamp. Every painful memory suddenly felt worthwhile. As cameras flashed around her, she accepted the appointment with quiet dignity. But even as one of Nigeria's youngest CEOs, another dream had already begun growing inside her heart. Business success had changed her own life. Now she wanted to change the lives of children who still stood outside school fences, believing education belonged to someone else. And she knew exactly where that journey had to begin. Becoming the youngest chief executive officer in the company's history transformed Adebimpe's life in ways she had never imagined. Her schedule became packed with board meetings, international conferences, investor presentations, and visits to development projects across Nigeria. Business magazines called her one of the country's most influential young leaders. Television stations requested interviews. Universities invited her to deliver graduation speeches. Despite the recognition, she refused to let success change the habits that had carried her this far. She still arrived at the office before most employees. She still read for at least an hour every morning. She still greeted security guards, cleaners, and receptionists by name. One afternoon, a newly hired receptionist nervously apologized after accidentally spilling coffee on a stack of meeting documents. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I've ruined everything." Several executives standing nearby looked uncomfortable. Before anyone could speak, Adebimpe smiled reassuringly. "It's only coffee. We'll print another copy." The young receptionist stared at her in surprise. "You're not angry?" Adebimpe gently shook her head. "I've made mistakes too. What matters is learning from them." The receptionist left the office with tears of relief in her eyes. One senior executive smiled after she walked away. Most CEOs wouldn't have reacted like that. Adebimpe quietly replied, "I remember what it felt like to be afraid of disappointing people." She never forgot. Every decision she made reflected the lessons hardship had taught her. Several months later, while reviewing proposals for community investment, one report immediately caught her attention. Thousands of children in rural communities were still leaving school because their families could not afford uniforms, books, or transportation. She closed the report slowly. The numbers reminded her of herself. That evening, she remained alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home. She looked through the large window overlooking the lights of Lagos. Then she picked up her notebook and wrote 4 words across the first page. Adebimpe Education Foundation. She spent the next several weeks developing the idea personally. The foundation would not simply provide scholarships, it would also supply books, build libraries, train teachers, support girls in vulnerable communities, provide mentoring for children who believed their dreams had already ended. Most importantly, no child would ever be rejected simply because of poverty. When she finally presented the proposal to the company's board, several directors immediately supported the initiative. One asked, "Why education?" Adebimpe smiled. "Because education gave me every opportunity I have today. If someone hadn't invested in me, I wouldn't be sitting in this room." The board unanimously approved the project. Within 6 months, the Adebimpe Education Foundation officially opened. News spread quickly across Nigeria. The launch ceremony attracted educators, community leaders, government officials, journalists, and business executives. Standing at the podium, Adebimpe looked across the audience before beginning her speech. When people see success, they often see only the destination. They rarely see the lonely road that came before it. "I know what it feels like to believe your future depends on circumstances beyond your control. I also know how one opportunity can change everything." She paused. "This foundation exists because every child deserves that opportunity." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Over the next 3 years, the foundation expanded rapidly. Hundreds of scholarships became thousands. Libraries appeared in villages that had never owned more than a few shelves of books. Solar-powered learning centers opened in remote farming communities. Volunteer mentors visited schools every month. Children who had nearly abandoned education suddenly discovered new hope. Every success brought Adebimpe deep satisfaction. Yet, one question quietly remained in her heart. What had happened to the Akinyemi family? She had not returned to the village since the morning she left. Occasionally, she wondered about Tunde and Yetunde. She wondered whether they had completed their education. She wondered whether Adewale and Ronki had ever regretted their decision. But she never asked anyone to investigate. She believed the past should remain in the past. Life, however, had already begun writing another chapter. Back in the village outside Ibadan, the Akinyemi family faced difficulties unlike anything they had experienced before. Several seasons of unpredictable weather damaged their harvests. Heavy rains destroyed part of their cassava fields one year. The following year brought severe drought. Production fell dramatically. Income disappeared. At first, they believed things would improve. Instead, each season became more difficult than the last. To survive, Adewale borrowed money from local lenders, then from agricultural suppliers, then from the village cooperative. Each loan carried another promise that the next harvest would solve everything. The next harvest never did. Meanwhile, Tunde graduated from university with an engineering degree. His parents celebrated proudly. "You'll change this family's future," Adewale told him. "I'll do my best, Baba." After graduation, Tunde accepted a job in Abuja. For the first few months, he called regularly. He sent small amounts of money whenever possible. Then the calls became less frequent. His work became busier. He married, started his own family. Eventually, weeks passed without communication. Whenever Ronke called, the conversations became shorter. "I'm in a meeting, Mama. I'll call later." Later rarely came. Yetunde also completed medical training with financial support from scholarships and educational loans. She accepted a position at a private hospital in Port Harcourt. At first, she visited during holidays, then only once a year. Eventually, even those visits stopped. Her responsibilities increased. Her own life demanded attention. Neither Tunde nor Yetunde intentionally abandoned their parents. But distance gradually replaced closeness. Each assumed the other was providing enough support. Neither realized how desperate conditions had become. One evening, Ronke sat quietly outside the aging farmhouse. The roof leaked. Several windows were broken. The vegetable garden had dried completely. She sighed deeply. When the children were young, I thought education guaranteed security. Adewale stared silently across the empty fields. It was supposed to. Another month passed. Debt collectors began visiting regularly. One morning, 2 men arrived carrying official documents. You've missed 3 consecutive payments. We need settlement. Adewale lowered his head. I need more time. You've already received more time. If payment isn't made, we'll begin legal proceedings. After they left, silence filled the compound. Ronke looked around the yard. For the first time in years, she noticed something unexpected. Everything that Adebimpe had once done now remained unfinished. The courtyard was covered with weeds. The water pots stood empty. Broken fences had never been repaired. She remembered how tirelessly the adopted girl had worked every single day, without complaint, without recognition, without love. A strange feeling settled into her heart, not yet regret, but something painfully close to it. That evening she called Tunde again. He answered after several attempts. Mama, we need help. I've already sent money last month. It wasn't enough. He hesitated. I'm paying a mortgage. The children just started school. Things are difficult here too. I understand. But your father, I'll see what I can do. The call ended. 2 weeks passed. No money arrived. Ronke then called Yetunde. Her daughter sounded exhausted. Mama, I'm working double shifts. I barely have time to sleep. We're losing the farm. I'm sorry. I truly am. But I can't solve everything. After the call, Ronke quietly placed the phone on the table. For the first time in many years, the house felt unbearably empty. The son they had invested everything in lived hundreds of kilometers away. The daughter whose education they had protected could no longer rescue them. As darkness settled over the village, Adewale whispered the question neither of them had dared ask before. I wonder, whatever became of Adebimpe? Neither of them knew that the little girl they had once considered nothing more than unpaid labor was now changing thousands of lives across Nigeria, and neither imagined that before long their own survival would depend upon the adopted daughter whose future they had once tried to destroy. Several months passed after the Adebimpe Education Foundation celebrated its 3rd anniversary. The organization had already awarded more than 5,000 scholarships across Nigeria, renovated dozens of rural schools, and opened community libraries in villages where children had once shared a single worn textbook. To the public, Adebimpe had become a symbol of hope. But despite her busy schedule, one habit never changed. Every Friday evening, she personally reviewed letters sent to the foundation. Some came from teachers requesting classroom supplies. Others came from parents struggling to keep their children in school. Many were handwritten by children. Each letter reminded her why the foundation existed. One rainy Friday, her assistant Miriam entered the office carrying another stack of envelopes. These arrived this afternoon. Adebimpe smiled. Thank you. I'll read them before I leave. Miriam hesitated. There's one I think you should see first. She handed over a thin brown envelope with no return address. The handwriting was shaky. The paper looked old. Adebimpe carefully unfolded the letter. It had been written by the headmaster of a small primary school outside Ibadan. The letter described several elderly families in the surrounding villages who had fallen into severe financial hardship after years of failed harvests. One paragraph immediately caught her attention. Among them is the Akinyemi family. Her heartbeat slowed. She continued reading. The headmaster explained that Adewale Akinyemi had become seriously ill after years of exhausting farm work. Medical bills continued to grow. The family had sold livestock farming equipment and most of their remaining land. Even basic food had become difficult to afford. The letter ended with a simple request. If your foundation has any emergency assistance available, these elderly villagers would be deeply grateful. Adebimpe quietly folded the letter. She looked out the office window without speaking. Miriam noticed the unusual silence. "Is everything all right?" Adebimpe nodded slowly. "Yes. I just recognized a name." She did not explain further. After Miriam left, Adebimpe remained seated for a long time. Memories returned one after another. The heavy buckets of water, the endless chores, the nights spent studying beneath a flickering kerosene lamp, the day Ronke nearly burned her books, the morning she left the village carrying one small bag. None of those memories had disappeared, but neither had Chief Olumide's voice. "Never allow bitterness to become your future." She closed her eyes. "What would you do?" she whispered softly. The answer came almost immediately, not because the decision was easy, because she already knew the kind of person she wanted to become. The next Monday morning, she called an emergency meeting with the Foundation's outreach team. "I've identified several elderly farming families who need immediate assistance." The project manager opened a notebook. "What kind of support?" "Medical treatment, food supplies, home repairs, debt assessment, and agricultural recovery if possible." The manager nodded. "We'll begin the usual evaluation process." Adebimpe shook her head. "No. This one needs to move faster. Prepare assistance immediately." Another staff member asked, "Would you like your name attached to the donations?" She answered without hesitation, "No. Everything remains anonymous." The room became quiet. Most major donors preferred public recognition. Adebimpe never had. "I don't want gratitude. I want results." Within days, the foundation organized assistance through local partner organizations. Doctors visited the affected families. Food deliveries arrived. Essential medications were purchased. Outstanding medical bills at the regional hospital were quietly settled. No one mentioned Adebimpe's name. Meanwhile, life at the Akinyemi household continued to grow more difficult. Adewale's health had declined significantly. Years of physical labor without proper medical care had damaged his back and lungs. Simple tasks now exhausted him. One afternoon, Ronke helped him sit beneath the old mango tree outside their home. "I never imagined we'd grow old like this." Adewale looked toward the empty fields. "Neither did I." The sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted their conversation. A white pickup truck stopped outside the compound. Two healthcare workers stepped out carrying medical supplies. Ronke frowned. "Can we help you?" One of them smiled warmly. "We're here to provide free medical services." "For us?" "Yes. We've also brought medication." Ronke looked confused. "We didn't request this." "It was arranged through a charitable foundation." "What foundation?" "I'm afraid we weren't told." The healthcare workers spent nearly 2 hours examining Adewale. Before leaving, they handed Ronke several months' worth of medication. "No payment is required." Ronke stared at the boxes. "Who paid for all this?" "I'm sorry." "We don't know." After they drove away, she remained standing in the yard holding the medicine. For the first time in months, she cried. Not because of sadness, because someone they had never met had shown them unexpected kindness. A week later, another surprise arrived. Volunteers repaired the leaking roof. Broken windows were replaced. The damaged water pump behind the house was restored. Again, no explanation came. Only one message appeared on every delivery receipt, with hope for brighter days ahead. Nothing more. Several neighboring villagers began talking. Someone important must be helping them. Maybe Tunde finally became wealthy. No, I heard Yatunde sent people. Everyone guessed. No one knew. One evening, Adewale quietly said, "Whoever this person is, they've shown us more kindness than we deserve." Ronke looked down. She had been thinking the same thing. Back in Lagos, Adebimpe received regular reports from the outreach team. Medical treatment completed. House repairs finished. Emergency food delivered. Debt negotiations underway. Every report ended successfully. She read each one silently, then filed it away. Miriam eventually noticed something unusual. "You've followed this family's progress very closely." Adebimpe smiled gently. "They're connected to my past." Miriam hesitated. "Do they know?" "No." "Will you ever tell them?" She looked thoughtfully toward the city skyline. "I don't know." Several weeks later, another report arrived. This one included photographs. The outreach coordinator had documented the completed repairs. As Adebimpe looked through the pictures, she recognized every corner of the old compound. The same courtyard she had swept every morning. The same storage room where she had secretly studied. The same mango tree beneath which she had often eaten alone. Everything looked older, smaller, more fragile than she remembered. One photograph stopped her completely. It showed Adewale sitting quietly outside the repaired house. His hair had turned almost completely white. His shoulders, once broad and strong, now appeared bent with age. Another picture showed Ronke arranging medicine on a small wooden table. She looked thinner, tired, much older. Adebimpe quietly placed the photographs back into the folder. There was no satisfaction in seeing them suffer, only sadness. That evening, she visited Chief Olumide's grave for the first time in several months. Fresh flowers rested beside the simple headstone. She knelt quietly. "I think I finally understand." She smiled through tears. "You always said forgiveness wasn't about pretending the past never happened. It was about refusing to let pain decide who we become." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. She remained there for several minutes. When she finally stood, her decision had become even clearer. Helping the Akinyemi family anonymously had been the right first step. But somehow, she sensed the story was not yet finished. Sooner or later, the truth would come to light. And when that day arrived, it would test not only whether Adewale and Ronke had truly changed, but whether Adebimpe's heart had fully healed from the wounds of her childhood. The anonymous assistance continued for nearly 6 months. During that time, the Akinyemi family slowly regained a sense of stability. Adewale's health improved with regular treatment. The repaired roof no longer leaked whenever heavy rains swept across the village. Fresh vegetables once again grew in the small garden behind the house. The crushing pressure of unpaid medical bills gradually disappeared. Still, one question remained unanswered. Who was helping them? Every package, every payment, every repair arrived through different organizations, but each representative gave the same response. We were asked not to reveal the donor's identity. Ronke often sat on the veranda in the evenings, staring down the dusty road. "I wish I could thank whoever this person is." Adewale nodded quietly. "So do I." One Sunday after church, the village pastor approached them. "I've been hearing wonderful things." Ronke smiled faintly. "We're still trying to understand it ourselves." The pastor folded his hands. "Sometimes God sends help through people who don't seek recognition. I believe someone has remembered your family." His words lingered in Ronke's mind long after the conversation ended. That same week, another unexpected visitor arrived. It was the headmaster of the village primary school. He carried several new books donated by the Adebimpe Education Foundation. Children surrounded him excitedly as volunteers unloaded boxes from a truck, brightly colored storybooks, science textbooks, mathematics workbooks, computers for the school library. The entire village gathered to watch. The headmaster proudly addressed everyone. These resources have been donated by the Adebimpe Education Foundation. They believe every child deserves access to quality education. The name caught Ronke's attention immediately. Adebimpe. She quietly repeated it to herself. Something about the name felt painfully familiar. Of course it did. Their adopted daughter had carried the same name. But Adebimpe was surely living an ordinary life somewhere. She couldn't possibly own a foundation known across Nigeria. The thought seemed impossible. Later that afternoon, Ronke mentioned it to Adewale. "Did you notice the foundation's name?" He nodded. "I did. It's probably just coincidence. There are many people named Adebimpe." Ronke tried to agree. Yet the uneasy feeling refused to disappear. Several days later, Tunde unexpectedly visited from Abuja. It had been almost a year since his previous trip. He looked exhausted. Work had clearly taken its toll. After greeting his parents, he noticed the repaired house immediately. "The roof looks new." It was repaired. By who? "We don't know." He listened as his parents explained everything. The medical bills, the food deliveries, the repairs, the mysterious donor. Tunde frowned thoughtfully. "Did you ever ask the organizations directly?" They all refused to answer. He remained unusually quiet throughout dinner. Late that night, while helping his father organize old family documents, he opened a dusty wooden trunk that had not been touched in years. Inside were faded photographs, old farming receipts, school certificates. Near the bottom lay an envelope containing several documents related to Adebimpe's adoption. Tunde carefully unfolded them. One paper caught his attention. It was a copy of her scholarship acceptance letter from many years earlier. He stared at the name, Adebimpe Akinyemi. The memory struck him immediately. The determined girl who studied every night beneath a kerosene lamp, the sister he had barely acknowledged, the small amount of money he had secretly given her before she left. He looked toward his father. "Did we ever find out what happened to her?" Adewale slowly shook his head. "No. I assumed she'd eventually come home. She never did." Tunde looked back at the old letter. "What if—" He stopped himself. "What? What if she actually accepted the scholarship?" Ronke sighed. "She probably did. I wonder where life took her." For the first time in many years, the entire family spoke openly about Adebimpe. Not with anger, not with resentment, only uncertainty. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away in Lagos, preparations were underway for the annual National Education Summit. The Adebimpe Education Foundation had been selected to receive the country's highest award for educational impact. Government officials, international partners, business leaders, journalists, representatives from schools across Nigeria, everyone would attend. As CEO and founder, Adebimpe was scheduled to deliver the keynote address. Her communications director reviewed the guest list. "We're inviting community representatives from villages where the foundation has completed major projects." Adebimpe nodded. "Excellent. We've also invited several headmasters." She smiled. "Perfect." The director continued reading. "One of them is the headmaster from your home district outside Ibadan." Adebimpe paused briefly. "My home district." "Yes. They've benefited significantly from the foundation's rural education program." She thought quietly for a moment. "Please make sure transportation is provided. No one should miss the event because they can't afford travel." "Of course." A week later, official invitations reached villages across the region. The headmaster of the village primary school received 4 guest passes. Unable to attend alone, he decided to invite respected members of the local community. Among those he selected were Adewale and Ronke. "You've both supported this village for many years," he explained. "It would be an honor to have you represent our community." Ronke looked surprised. "We've never attended anything like this." "You'll enjoy it. The foundation is doing remarkable work." Neither she nor Adewale realized whose foundation they were about to visit. On the morning of the summit, buses transported guests from different states to Lagos. Everything felt unfamiliar to the elderly couple. The towering buildings, the busy highways, the enormous convention center. Inside the main hall, giant screens displayed photographs of smiling children receiving scholarships, opening libraries, and attending newly renovated schools. Large banners carried one message: "Education changes everything." Ronke quietly studied the display. "There are so many children." Adewale nodded. This foundation must have helped thousands. Guests gradually filled the auditorium. Government ministers took their seats. Business executives gathered near the front. Journalists prepared cameras. Soft music played through the hall. Then the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the founder of the Adebimpe Education Foundation, one of Nigeria's most respected business leaders, our keynote speaker." The lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the entrance to the stage. Elegant, confident, graceful. A woman in a tailored navy blue suit walked calmly toward the podium. The moment Ronke saw her face, the color drained from her own. Her hands began trembling uncontrollably. "No," she whispered. Adewale leaned forward. His breathing became uneven. "It can't be." On the giant screen above the stage appeared a smiling portrait beside the words, "Chief Executive Officer, Adebimpe Akinyemi," the same little girl who had once carried buckets of water before sunrise, the same adopted daughter they had refused to educate, the same child they had told her future belonged inside their house, now stood before the entire nation as one of its most admired leaders. Neither Adewale nor Ronke could move. Neither could speak. As applause thundered through the convention hall, one overwhelming realization settled into their hearts. The anonymous kindness that had saved their family had never come from a stranger. It had come from the daughter whose dreams they had tried to destroy. The applause seemed to last forever. Adebimpe stood confidently behind the podium, waiting patiently for the audience to settle. From the stage, she could see government officials, educators, business executives, community leaders, and scholarship recipients. She had spoken before thousands of people many times, but today felt different. Without realizing it, her eyes drifted across the audience. Then they stopped. Near the middle of the hall sat 2 elderly figures she recognized immediately: Adewale, Ronke. Time seemed to freeze. For one brief moment, memories flooded back with overwhelming clarity. The heavy buckets balanced on her head before sunrise, the torn notebooks hidden beneath her sleeping mat, the nights she studied by the weak glow of a kerosene lamp, the day Ronke had nearly thrown her books into the fire, the morning she had walked away carrying nothing but one cloth bag. Her heartbeat quickened. She had imagined meeting them again many times over the years. Sometimes she imagined anger, sometimes silence, sometimes tears. But she had never expected to see them sitting quietly in the audience while she stood on the stage. She took one slow breath, then another. The years had taught her something important. Leadership required emotional discipline. Whatever she felt personally could not interfere with the purpose of the moment. She smiled gently and began her speech. Distinguished guests respected educators, honored community leaders, Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. The hall became completely silent. I often receive one question. Why did you build an education foundation instead of simply expanding your business? She paused. The answer is simple. Business changed my career. Education changed my life. Several people nodded. When I was a little girl, I believed classrooms were places I would never enter. I believed books belonged to other children. I believed dreams were luxuries reserved for families with money. The audience listened carefully, but one person believed I deserved an opportunity. He looked beyond my circumstances. He saw potential where others saw only limitations. He taught me that poverty is never proof of a lack of ability. A photograph of Chief Olumide appeared on the large screen behind her. The audience applauded respectfully. I owe much of my life to that remarkable teacher. I stand here today because someone chose encouragement instead of indifference. She looked toward the students sitting near the front rows. Never underestimate the power of believing in one child. You may never fully understand how many lives that decision will eventually change. As she continued speaking, Adewale sat motionless. His eyes never left the stage. The confident woman addressing the nation was the same little girl he had once told, "Your future is here." The memory pierced his heart. Beside him, Ronke quietly wiped away tears. Every sentence Adebimpe spoke seemed to expose another painful truth. Not once had she blamed anyone. Not once had she spoken with bitterness. Instead, she spoke only about gratitude, opportunity, and hope. That hurt even more. When the speech ended, the audience rose in another standing ovation. Journalists hurried toward the front. Government ministers prepared for photographs. Scholarship recipients lined up to greet Adebimpe. Adewale remained seated. I don't think I can face her. Ronke whispered, We have to. But what do we even say? Neither had an answer. Meanwhile, backstage, Adebimpe accepted congratulations from dozens of guests. Her communications director approached. Outstanding speech. Thank you. You have several interviews scheduled. She nodded. Please delay them for 30 minutes. Of course. Is everything all right? Adebimpe smiled politely. I need to meet someone. The director walked away without asking another question. A few minutes later, a volunteer approached Adewale and Ronke. Mr. and Mrs. Akinyemi. They looked up nervously. Miss Adebimpe would like to see you. Neither moved immediately. Ronke's hands trembled. She wants to see us. Yes. If you're ready. The short walk to the private meeting room felt longer than any journey they had ever taken. When the volunteer opened the door, Adebimpe was already waiting. She stood quietly beside the window overlooking Lagos. For several seconds, no one spoke. The silence carried years of unspoken memories. Finally, Adewale lowered his head. You've done well. Adebimpe smiled gently. Thank you, Baba. The familiar word nearly broke him. After everything they had done, she still addressed him respectfully. Ronke suddenly began crying. We don't deserve that. Adebimpe looked at her calmly. No one deserves kindness. That's why it's kindness. Ronke covered her face. We failed you. We failed completely. I think about those days every single night. I remember every chore. Every time you asked to go to school. Every time I said no. Her voice broke. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. Adewale finally spoke. I kept telling myself I was protecting the family. But I was protecting my own comfort. I chose what was easier, not what was right. He looked directly at Adebimpe. There isn't a single day I don't regret it. The room became quiet again. Adebimpe listened without interrupting. She had imagined hearing these words for many years. Now that they had finally been spoken, she felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, only sadness for all the years that had been lost. Ronka slowly reached into her handbag. She removed a carefully folded piece of paper. "We wrote this. We didn't know if we'd ever see you. I wanted to say everything properly." She handed it over with trembling hands. Adebimpe unfolded the letter. It contained no excuses, no attempts to justify the past, only an honest apology. Every page acknowledged specific mistakes. Every paragraph accepted responsibility. At the bottom appeared 2 simple sentences. "We cannot change your childhood. We can only ask whether your heart still has room to forgive us." Adebimpe carefully folded the letter again. Tears filled her own eyes. "I won't pretend those years didn't hurt. They did. They shaped every part of my life." She paused. "There were nights I wondered why I wasn't worth educating. There were days I believed something was wrong with me." Ronke cried even harder. "I'm sorry, so sorry. But there was also someone who taught me another lesson." She smiled softly. "Chief Olumide used to tell me that pain should become a bridge, not a prison. I've tried to live by those words." Adewale looked confused. "The anonymous help, the hospital bills, the repairs, was that really you?" She nodded. "Yes." "Why?" His voice cracked. "After everything," Adebimpe answered quietly. Because I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to become. If I helped only people who had always treated me well, my kindness would have very small limits." Silence filled the room once more. Adewale slowly sank to his knees. "I'm ashamed." "You don't owe us anything. But if forgiveness is possible, please allow us to spend whatever years we have left trying to become better people." Ronke knelt beside him. "We're not asking you to forget. We're only asking for one chance to make peace." Adebimpe looked at the 2 elderly people before her. The powerful emotions she had carried for years slowly gave way to compassion. The frightened little girl inside her still remembered every painful moment. But the woman she had become understood something far greater. Forgiveness would never erase the past. Yet it could finally free all 3 of them from continuing to live inside it. She stepped forward, then gently helped both Adewale and Ronke rise to their feet. Adebimpe gently held Ronke's trembling hands until they stopped shaking. For several long moments, none of them spoke. The silence was no longer heavy with anger. Instead, it carried the weight of years that could never be lived again. Finally, Adebimpe broke the silence. "Please don't kneel. You are both old enough to be resting your knees, not hurting them." Adewale slowly stood. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. "I don't know how to face you." Adebimpe answered quietly, "By telling the truth." He nodded. "No excuses. No excuses. No blaming poverty. No. No saying you didn't know better." She shook her head gently. "The truth is enough." For the first time in many years, Adewale looked directly into her eyes. "When you came to our house, you were just a frightened little girl. I told myself we were rescuing you. But after a while, I stopped seeing you as a child. I saw only another pair of hands." His voice became unsteady. "Every morning I watched you carry water that was too heavy. I watched you work while Tunde and Yetunde carried school bags. I noticed. I simply chose not to act." Ronke covered her mouth as tears rolled down her face. "I was worse. I kept telling myself that one day things would become easier. But every time you worked harder, I gave you even more work. I stole your childhood. I stole your chance to simply be a little girl. Adebimpe listened quietly. Every confession reopened painful memories. Yet, something had changed inside her over the years. She no longer needed them to suffer in order to heal. She only needed the truth to be acknowledged. After several moments, she spoke. I cannot change what happened. Neither can you. But we can decide what happens next. Before either of them could answer, there was a gentle knock at the meeting room door. A Foundation staff member stepped inside. Ma'am, the press conference will begin in 15 minutes. Adebimpe nodded. Thank you. The staff member left. Ronke immediately stepped backward. We shouldn't keep you. You have important people waiting. Adebimpe smiled softly. Today, you are important people. Their eyes filled with fresh tears. A few minutes later, Adebimpe made an unexpected request to the event organizers. I'd like to change the program slightly. The Master of Ceremonies looked surprised. Oh, what would you like to do? I'd like to invite 2 special guests onto the stage. Of course. Who are they? She quietly wrote 2 names on a small card. The organizer looked at the names briefly before nodding. We'll make the arrangements. Meanwhile, journalists gathered inside the main auditorium. Television cameras pointed toward the stage. Government officials returned to their seats. The audience expected a routine press conference following the award ceremony. Instead, something entirely different was about to happen. The Master of Ceremonies stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, before today's closing remarks, our keynote speaker has requested a special moment. We ask for your attention. Adebimpe walked back onto the stage. The applause gradually faded. She looked across the audience before speaking. Earlier today, I spoke about opportunity. Now I'd like to speak about responsibility. She paused. Every child deserves encouragement, but every adult also has a responsibility to admit mistakes. The audience listened attentively. I've invited 2 people to join me. Please welcome Mr. Adewale Akinyemi and Mrs. Ronke Akinyemi. A quiet murmur spread across the auditorium. The elderly couple slowly walked toward the stage. Neither understood exactly why they had been invited. Adebimpe greeted them warmly before turning back to the audience. These are the people who raised me. Many people smiled politely, assuming they were being honored. But Adebimpe continued. My childhood was not easy. I was denied opportunities. I worked while other children studied. The room became silent. She did not speak dramatically. She simply stated the facts with calm honesty. I share this today for one reason only. She looked toward Adewale and Ronke. Because courage is not only found in those who overcome hardship, it is also found in those willing to admit they were wrong. She gently nodded toward them. Adewale stepped forward slowly. His hands trembled as he adjusted the microphone. I never imagined I would stand before so many people. He took a deep breath. My wife and I made terrible decisions. We adopted a little girl. But instead of treating her like a daughter, we treated her like free labor. The audience became completely still. We paid school fees for our biological children, but refused to educate her. I told myself we couldn't afford it. That wasn't the truth. The truth was, her work made our lives easier. His voice cracked. I chose convenience over justice. I failed as a father. Several people quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Ronke then stepped forward. I have lived with regret for many years. I remembered every time she asked to attend school. I remembered every excuse I made. I believed I was protecting my family, but I was actually destroying part of it. She looked directly at Adebimpe. I cannot return your childhood. I cannot erase your pain. But I will spend the rest of my life warning other parents never to repeat our mistakes." The hall remained silent for several seconds. Then applause slowly began. Not applause celebrating what had happened. Applause recognizing the courage required to publicly accept responsibility. Several journalists lowered their cameras. Some were visibly emotional. A government education minister leaned toward another official. This may be the most powerful message of the entire conference. After the event ended, dozens of reporters approached Adebimpe. One journalist asked, "Do you believe everyone deserves forgiveness?" She thought carefully before answering. "No. I believe forgiveness is a gift. It cannot be demanded. It must be freely given." Another reporter asked, "What made you help the family anonymously after everything they did?" She smiled gently. "Because kindness is easiest when people deserve it. The real test comes when they don't." A third journalist asked, "Will you continue supporting them?" She nodded. "Yes. But not because they are connected to me. I will support them for the same reason our foundation supports every vulnerable family. Every human being has value." Her answer quickly spread across newspapers, television programs, and social media. People across Nigeria discussed not only her success, but also her extraordinary response to personal injustice. Many praised her. Others admitted they would have struggled to do the same. The following morning, before returning to the village, Adewale and Ronke met privately with Adebimpe one final time. Adewale held a small wooden box. "I've carried this for years." Inside lay several old belongings. A faded childhood photograph taken shortly after Adebimpe's adoption, a tiny bracelet that had belonged to her late mother, and one carefully preserved item, the first charcoal-covered alphabet sheet she had secretly practiced writing as a child. Ronke smiled sadly. "I found it after you left. I couldn't throw it away. I didn't know why. I think part of me already knew we had made the greatest mistake of our lives." Adebimpe gently held the fragile paper. The charcoal letters were faded. Some were barely visible. Yet every line reminded her of the little girl who had refused to stop believing. She carefully folded the paper and placed it back into the box. "This belongs to all of us now." As they embraced for the first time as a true family, none of them imagined that their reconciliation would soon inspire an entire village and eventually a new community project that would ensure countless children would never again have to choose between hard work and an education. Several weeks after the National Education Summit, Adebimpe returned to the village outside Ibadan for the first time in nearly 15 years. The news of her visit spread quickly. Children ran through the dusty streets excitedly. Neighbors stepped out of their homes. Farmers paused their work in the fields. By the time her vehicle entered the village, dozens of people had gathered near the community square. Many recognized the successful business leader they had seen on television. Others remembered only the quiet little girl who had once carried water before sunrise. Now, the two memories became one. As Adebimpe stepped out of the vehicle, the village head greeted her warmly. "Welcome home." She smiled respectfully. "Thank you. It's good to be back." She looked around slowly. The village had changed in some ways. New shops had appeared. The school building had been painted. Electricity now reached more homes than before. Yet many things remained exactly as she remembered. The old mango tree still stood beside the primary school. The narrow dirt road still wound through the farms. Children still walked long distances, carrying worn school bags. She quietly whispered to herself, "There's still more work to do." The entire community gathered beneath a large canopy erected near the village hall. Teachers' parents, students' traditional leaders, church members, and local officials all waited expectantly. A small stage had been prepared for the ceremony. The village head stepped forward first. Today is a historic day. One of our own has returned. Not only as a successful business leader, but as someone who never forgot where she came from. The audience applauded. Then he invited Adebimpe to speak. She walked calmly to the microphone. Looking across the crowd, she noticed familiar faces. Some had watched silently while she worked as a child. Some had pitied her. Some had ignored her. None of those feelings remained important anymore. She smiled warmly. When I left this village many years ago, I carried only one small bag. I had no money, no family waiting elsewhere, no certainty about tomorrow. I carried only hope. The crowd listened in complete silence. I stand here today because one teacher believed that hope deserved a chance. She looked toward the front row, where an empty chair decorated with white flowers honored the memory of Chief Olumide Adeyemi. He taught me that education is more powerful than poverty. He taught me that kindness creates opportunities. And he taught me something even greater. He taught me that success has no meaning unless it helps someone else rise. Many people wiped away tears. Adebimpe continued. Today, I want to honor the man who changed my life. She turned toward the large covered sign beside the stage. With the help of two school children, she gently pulled away the cloth. The audience immediately burst into applause. The new sign read, Chief Olumide Adeyemi, Community Education and Learning Center. Many people stood to their feet. The building behind the stage had once been an abandoned community warehouse. Now it had been transformed into a modern learning center. Inside were classrooms, a digital computer lab, a library containing thousands of books, study rooms powered by solar energy, free internet access for students, teacher training facilities, evening literacy classes for adults. Everything had been built through the Adebimpe Education Foundation. Children rushed excitedly toward the entrance. Teachers looked around in amazement. Several elderly villagers quietly shook their heads in disbelief. One elderly woman whispered, I never imagined we'd see something like this here. After the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Adebimpe personally guided the first group of children through the building. She watched them touch computers for the first time, browse colorful books, sit at clean desks, laugh together with excitement. One little girl timidly approached her. Ma'am. Yes, I want to become an engineer. Adebimpe smiled. Then start believing today. The girl nodded confidently. I will. Later that afternoon, another ceremony took place. This time it was organized by Adewale and Ronke. Without telling Adebimpe in advance, they had invited the entire village. Adewale slowly walked onto the stage. He looked older than ever, but his voice carried unexpected strength. I've asked everyone here to gather because there is something I must say publicly. The crowd became quiet. He looked toward Adebimpe. When this young woman entered our home, God entrusted us with a daughter. I failed that responsibility. I chose convenience over compassion. I valued work more than education. I treated one child differently simply because she was adopted. He paused to steady himself. I was wrong. I say this today so every parent here hears me clearly. Never decide a child's future based on where that child came from. Judge them by their character. Support their dreams. Because you may be standing in the way of blessings you cannot yet imagine. Ronke stepped beside him. I spent years believing I could never undo my mistakes. I still can't, but I can tell every mother here, love every child equally. No child should have to earn affection through suffering. Several parents quietly embraced their children. Teachers nodded in agreement. The message reached hearts far beyond the Akinyemi family. When the speeches ended, Adebimpe joined Adewale and Ronke before the audience. She gently held both of their hands. I cannot change my childhood. They cannot change their mistakes. But together, we can help create a better childhood for someone else. The applause seemed endless. Over the following months, the new learning center became one of the busiest places in the district. Children studied there every afternoon. Adults attended evening literacy classes. Teachers participated in professional training. Scholarship workshops helped students prepare for competitive examinations. The center quickly became a symbol of hope throughout the region. Adebimpe visited regularly whenever business allowed. Sometimes she arrived quietly without announcing herself. She loved watching children read beneath the same kind of evening light that had once illuminated her own secret lessons. Each visit reminded her why she had worked so hard. One evening before returning to Lagos, she walked alone to the old mango tree beside the primary school. She rested one hand against its familiar trunk. The memories no longer brought pain, only gratitude. She smiled softly. Thank you, Chief. I hope I've honored your faith in me. A gentle breeze moved through the branches above. For a moment, it almost felt as though the old educator were smiling back. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the fields, children carrying library books walked happily toward their homes. Unlike the little girl Adebimpe had once been, they no longer had to stand outside classroom windows, wondering whether education belonged to them. They already knew the answer. It did. And because one forgotten adopted daughter had refused to surrender her dream, countless other children would never have to doubt their own. Every life is shaped by the choices we make, but even more by the choices we make after we have been hurt. Adebimpe's journey reminds us that our beginnings do not determine our destination. She was denied love, denied education, and denied the simple joys every child deserves. Yet instead of allowing bitterness to define her future, she chose perseverance, wisdom, and compassion. The greatest victory in her life was not becoming a successful CEO or earning the respect of an entire nation. Her greatest victory was refusing to become the person her painful experiences could have turned her into. She proved that true success is measured not by wealth titles or recognition, but by the number of lives we lift along the way. Likewise, Adewale and Ronke teach us another important lesson. Admitting our mistakes does not erase the past, but it opens the door to healing. Pride keeps families divided, while humility gives broken relationships a chance to be restored. Every child deserves to be loved equally, encouraged equally, and given the opportunity to discover their potential. Sometimes the child who seems forgotten today may become the person who changes countless lives tomorrow. Never underestimate the power of kindness, education, or a single person who chooses to believe in someone the world has overlooked. One act of encouragement can create a ripple effect that reaches generations. No matter where you come from, no matter how difficult your circumstances may be, never stop believing that your future can be different. Your story is not written by your past. It is written by the decisions you make today and the hope you refuse to surrender tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, we would truly love to hear from you. What lesson impacted you the most, and what would you have done if you were in Adebimpe's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story may encourage someone else who needs hope today. If you enjoy inspiring stories about resilience, justice, forgiveness, and second chances, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next life-changing story. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.